Good morning. This is Sandra Hess, and I am here with Mark Clenard, owner of Both Barrels Wine Company. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks so much for taking some time out to join me and introduce us to Both Barrels Wine Company. I'm really excited to learn more about your unique process to sourcing wines from throughout the world, from rare climates, rare soils. So why don't we start off with you introducing Both Barrels, and we'll go from there.
Sure. I started out my career studying forestry and biology in North Carolina, and I quickly learned that my calling was the fine wine industry. And so I started out working in the fine wine industry in North Carolina, selling Bordeaux's to restaurateurs. And then the Australian wine industry was sort of heating up at the time. And so I went to work for Rosemount Estate in the U.S. And shortly after that, I became a partner in the Click Wine Group in Seattle, where we launched brands like Kangaroo Road from Australia, Meth from the Rhone Valley, Route 1 from Chile. About the space where I learned about Spanish wine, and that became my next love. So I started a new company called Well Oiled Wine Company, where we sourced high-end Spanish wine for the U.S. market. And then after that, I realized that the future really is in Portugal. It's such an unknown, unheralded area, having a lot of high altitude, rare wines. So I started the most recent company, which is Both Barrels Wine Company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually wrote a publication about 10 years ago that talked about how antioxidants get into a red wine. And it turned out that after testing a lot of the different wines, altitude played a big part in that. It seems that resveratrol is a bit like the immune system for a grapevine. And in the more extreme temperatures in areas, you have a situation where the vine has to protect itself. So the new brand is Beaufort and Scott, and what it does is it finds high altitude vineyards from around the world, not just from El Dorado, California, where the first one is from, but Salta, Argentina, where they get up as high as 9,000 feet, a couple thousand feet in Portugal. So we're going to sort of pick the eyes out of the high altitude vineyards from around the world, with the idea of the content of resveratrol being much higher.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. I see more and more press and doctors really getting involved now in the power of resveratrol when it comes to the antioxidant power and the benefits, the health benefits that we can all experience. So that's an interesting project that I know you've been working on for several years now, and I continue to see that evolving. My husband and I both have enjoyed the wines from Beaufort and Scott, and so exciting to see what you have coming up there next. Now, when we chatted last also, you mentioned that you had just come back from a trip to Spain, meeting with some winemakers there. And so from what I understand, one of your passions with Both Barrels Wine Company is to travel the world, finding these really interesting rare climates, rare soils.
Spain, like Portugal and Australia, has some really, really ancient soils. So much so that phylloxera won't even take foot in it. Phylloxera being that little louse that gets in there and eats away at the rootstock. So, finding soils like from Toro and from Humilla and also the Douro in Portugal, you're finding pre-phylloxera vines, and you're finding winemaking techniques and varieties that are quite unique to that region. Now, in Australia, just to shift gears a little bit, we discovered a group of Australian winemakers who have discovered some ancient soils, 550 million year old soils. And so they've decided to experiment a bit to see what would happen if you planted, indigenous species and some Shiraz into these ancient soils, and the result has been phenomenal. It's a project called the Scarce Earth Project, whereby 10 wineries are participating in these ancient soils. The first release is actually, one of them is on my website, which is the Kangaroo Road Scarce Earth Alluvial Fans. It's available in very limited quantities online as we speak.
So moving back to our discussion around, I think where you're sourcing some of these wines and how the winemakers are getting involved. Can you share with me a little bit about your winemaker relationships and how that's played a part in you discovering some of these hard to find wines from rare climates?
Sure. There's only a select few folks in both Spain, Portugal, and for that matter, Australia, that have really taken the time to produce grapes from the soil up. They realize that the soil plays into this, and a lot of these guys have history in geology, and they're taking their science background and applying it to winemaking. Kevin O'Brien is one of those. He's one of my heroes in the industry, and he and his wife Helen have started producing, as I mentioned, the Scarce Earth project. But all of his wines have a unique sense of place. I think unfortunately the Australian landscape for wines has become somewhat homogenous. We see a lot of it in the grocery stores. A lot of it tastes alike. I think when people taste Kangaroo Road, they'll understand what Kevin and Helen are doing, which is making wines with a keen sense of place. The vineyard really, the vineyard flavors really coming through in the wines. Minimal oak, so that the vineyard will really shine, and really maximizing what the Australian sun can do, which is a long, long photo period, so you get a long ripening period. Mm-hmm. And then back to Spain for a little bit, you're having these pre-phylloxera vines is basically like telling a winemaker, produce what you want, plant what you want, make what you want. It's an open canvas, if you will, to produce the style of wines that they really like. And now with a lot of modern winemaking techniques that have been introduced from as the EU has invested more money into Spain and Portugal, you're seeing a lot more modern techniques giving brighter, cleaner wines to the market, and also less of the bottle variation that we used to see from those countries years ago. Stainless steel being stainless steel tanks, centrifuges, cleaning techniques being really, really important. And then new fresh oak and recycling that oak is really important part of the process. So I think that's why we're seeing so many wines out of Spain and Portugal that really quite candidly didn't exist before. So this is a fantastic time to be buying and consuming Spanish and Portuguese wine.
Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting niche that you are involved in, and it sounds like you're a really busy guy. I mean, traveling the world, meeting with these winemakers, sourcing these rare wines, and now making them available to consumers throughout the U.S. in your online store, a Both Barrels Wine Company. So how does that work exactly? It sounds like, are we able to get our hands on limited wines for a limited period? Are there new wines that are cycling through? How does that work through the e-commerce site?
Yeah, the reason why I did the e-commerce site is I knew that I would run into some of these small lots of super rare wines, but I didn't want them to be, sold in just one market. I wanted to make sure that consumers across the nation had a chance to take a bite out of these small allocations. So a lot of times you're talking about less than a couple hundred cases. Sometimes you're talking about 30 cases, lots. But we make them available for a very brief period of time on bothbarrelswine.com so people can have a chance at trying these. And as I travel and as I look around, there's going to be wines that are sold through the wholesale market, but there's going to be a lot of these gems that are just for Both Barrels, whereby the consumer who cares about these sort of high-end rare wines can have a chance to buy them.
Can you give us some early insights around what you have planned next?
Right. So I did do a little video tour of Spain and Portugal. There's one region in particular in Portugal that I'm kind of excited about because there's the grape that exists there that's predominant. It's called Baga. And it's kind of the unicorn, if you will, for a line of winemakers. It's very, very hard to make. It tends to make a very astringent, difficult wine. But if you have the right environment, if you have the right winemaking tools, if you have the right experience, it makes an absolutely glorious wine that a lot of people would say age longer than even the biggest, first growth Bordeaux's. It's not port. It's still table red wine, red table wine, I should say. but it's this particular wine that I'm thinking about is can age 50 years easily. And be as bright and clean as when it was bottled. It's really kind of a phenomenon. There's not much of it made, but we're going to offer some of that to the consumers once the wine makes it over here from Portugal.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to check that out. It sounds like a great wine to enjoy with some summertime barbecues, and also for the collector, for that seller. So I'll be keeping my eyes out for your next release, Mark. And Mark Clenard, again, Both Barrels Wine Company. I really appreciate you taking some time out from all of your travels and really sharing these unique wines with us all here in the U.S. A great opportunity to explore different parts of the world. And so we'll look forward to your continued releases and your upcoming videos through bothbarrelswine.com. Again, thanks for your time this morning.
It's my pleasure to speak with you, Sandra.
Cheers.
Thank you.